Back on July 7th, more than 150 mostly left-leaning intellectuals attached their names to an open letter published in Harper's Magazine to object to what they saw as, quote, a new set of moral attitudes and political commitments that tend to weaken our norms of open debate and toleration of differences in favour of ideological conformity. It went on, we uphold the value of robust and even caustic counter-speech from all quarters, but it is now all too common to hear calls for swift and severe retribution in response to perceived transgressions of speech and thought. More troubling still, institutional leaders, in a spirit of panic damage control, are delivering hasty and disproportionate punishments instead of considered reforms. Editors are fired for running controversial pieces, books are withdrawn for alleged inauthenticity, journalists are barred from writing on certain topics, professors are investigated for quoting works of literature in class, a researcher is fired for circulating a peer-reviewed academic study, and the heads of organisations are ousted for what are sometimes just clumsy mistakes. So essentially this was objecting to what has become known as cancel culture, trying to get someone sanctioned or worse fired for doing or saying something innocuous regardless of their intent. And it doesn't have to be something said or published today. There is no statute of limitations on being cancelled. This month, Boeing head of communications Neil Golightly resigned because he wrote an article 33 years ago when he was a military pilot, stating he believed women should not serve in combat. James Damore is probably the classic case, stating basic facts explaining why there are more men than women in tech, whilst at the same time making suggestions about how to attract more women to the tech industry, was what got him fired, even though many prominent biologists and psychologists said he got the basic science right in his memo. Or in the case of J.K. Rowling, someone that is too big to cancel, the object is public shaming because she dared utter the hate speech that biological sex is a real thing. So back to the letter, and the woke objected to it, of course, by saying that cancel culture doesn't actually exist. The very aptly named Charles Blow of the New York Times tweeted that there is no such thing as cancel culture. There is free speech. You can say and do as you please, and others can choose never to deal with you, your company, or your products ever again. The rich and powerful are just upset that the masses can now organise their dissent. It's not really the masses, though, is it? It's just a small minority of very vocal woke dickheads. This was followed up by a counter letter signed by 164 journalists, writers and academics, basically saying that cancel culture is much ado about nothing. And besides, marginalised groups have had to put up with being silent since the beginning of time, so now it's your turn, white privileged bigots. Interestingly, 25 of the signatories to the counter letter didn't actually disclose their names, because they feared being cancelled. It appears they don't want to be held accountable for their views. One of the signatories to the Harper's letter was Vox's Matt Iglesias, which immediately drew fire from his colleagues at Vox. One in particular, Emily Vanderwerf, a trans woman, said that Iglesias' signature on the Harper's letter made her feel less safe. That's right, someone signing a letter in solidarity for civil debate made this trans flake feel less safe. Iglesias still has his job, so I guess cancel culture doesn't really exist after all. But try telling that to Gary Garrels. Garrels was, until a couple of weeks ago, the senior curator of painting and sculpture at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Garrels resigned after museum employees circulated a petition that accused him of racism and demanded his immediate firing. Here's the sum total of Garrels' alleged crimes. When pressed on the museum's collecting policies, he has repeatedly said some variation of, "Don't worry, we will continue to collect white male artists." Amongst SFMOMA staff as well as in public view, Gary has used and continued to use white supremacist and racist language such as reverse discrimination. This has been documented. So the term reverse discrimination is now white supremacist language. Interesting. According to art.net, what Garrels said was that the museum could not avoid collecting the work of white men, which would amount to reverse discrimination. Now, I think Garrels is wrong. Not collecting the work of white men is not reverse discrimination. It would be discrimination. The reverse is redundant. Discrimination is discrimination. Doesn't matter the identity of the perpetrator or the target. So you know how this goes by now. The usual woke wankers wade into an institution demanding there be more representation from so-called marginalised voices. White guy then bends over backwards to accommodate this non-merit-based bullshit, but adds the caveat that we'll still collect art from white men, and the woke tards lose their shit and accuse him of white supremacy. And just as an aside, yes, I realise it's probably not accurate to use the word merit when talking of modern art, since it's mostly wankery masquerading as talent. Anyway, let's listen to the hysterical bedwetting conclusion of the petition. Gary's removal from the museum is non-negotiable. Considering his lengthy tenure at this institution, we ask just how long have his toxic white supremacist beliefs regarding race and equity directed his position curating the content of the museum? Yes, his toxic white supremacist beliefs that you shouldn't exclude artists' work based on their gender or race. But hey, Garrels resigned rather than being fired, so I guess cancel culture is just all made up. And if you believe that, you've just been gaslighted. As usual, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you next time.